There's been a lot of noise about this new House Speaker, the idea that somebody with such extreme Christian nationalist views could be voted into a central place of power. Mike Johnson of Louisiana. He took office on Wednesday, and Democrats have been pondering a crucial question. Can Mr. Johnson, who previously collaborated with former President Donald Trump in attempts to challenge the 2020 election, achieve success in 2024 where he fell short before? The Speaker role, it's second in line to the presidency, and it carries significant authority in shaping the House's operations. Mr. Johnson, a constitutional lawyer whose influence within his party has expanded with his ascent to this top position, may make another attempt to influence proceedings, overturn an election. He's a Christian nationalist with extremist beliefs. He's co-sponsored a national 15-week abortion ban, as well as a ban on the most common second trimester abortion method. He also co-sponsored bills to strip Planned Parenthood of federal funding, to force providers to tell women that they may be able to reverse their abortions, a claim unproven by science, and to make it a federal crime to transport a minor across state lines for a legal abortion without telling that minor's parents. Mike Johnson backed a bill that would have established that life begins at conception and redefined fetuses as human beings. So-called parenthood bills could upend vast swathes of U.S. law.
Roe v. Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America, period. You think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this. Listen,
the gentleman,
I will not yield. I will not.
Well, before arriving at the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson worked as an attorney for the Alliance Defending Freedom, a powerhouse of a Christian law firm and the organization behind much of the modern anti-abortion movement's legal strategy. The group drafted model legislation that led to a 15-week abortion ban in Mississippi, which ultimately was at the heart of the case used to overturn Roe v. Wade. And in addition to being anti-abortion, he also introduced federal legislation modelled on Florida's Don't Say Gay bill and has been opposed to gender-affirming care. Now, I moved to the United States as a naive European, I guess. I foolishly thought that the US was leading the charge on change, growth, openness, humanity, and kindness. I mean, Obama was the president at the time, and I thought that with that came a huge movement of progress. But it became clear to me that actually half the voting public were not happy about Barack Obama being the president because of the color of his skin, amongst other things. And this idea of liberalism, which is something that is normal throughout Europe, the idea that women have access to healthcare is normal. And reversing Roe takes the country back 50 years, and I just cannot see anyone even suggesting it in the UK or Europe. Because, these countries recognize that we are hopefully all equal. Male, female, gay, straight, trans, cis, it's irrelevant. But the US, unfortunately, is starting to elect people who actually have very different views. Now, liberalism, which seems to be used as a dirty word in the US, we don't really talk about liberals in the UK in the same way that it's used as a kind of negative word. You liberal. Liberalism is normal as an ideology. It places a strong emphasis on individual freedom and civil rights and the rule of law. It advocates for safeguarding individual liberty through government assurances of civil rights and freedoms and responsibilities with society. A key principle of liberalism is the notion that governments should minimize their intervention in economic activities, focusing primarily on enforcing contracts and property rights and market regulations that promote healthy competition. Now, the thing is, a lot of that sounds like conservatism. And my point is that the liberalism and conservatism in a modern world, a capitalist world, aren't that far apart. But unfortunately, people like Mike Johnson are suggesting otherwise and are bringing about a Christian nationalist and extremist religious connotation to conversations that actually everybody, in my view, should be agreeing on. You know, liberalism champions the concept of equal rights for individuals, irrespective of factors such as race or gender or sexual orientation. And you know, gay people exist and trans people exist. There's 3 million trans people in the United States. It's normal. It's not a fringe thing. It's a normal part of humanity. People born in the wrong body. And yet people like Mike Johnson seem to think that you can pray away the gay. Liberalism promotes personal responsibility. It fosters a merit-based society where individuals can achieve success through hard work. Sound familiar? Yeah, sounds like traditional conservatism. But the point is that Mike Johnson and his people, the MAGA Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, whatever you want to call it, they actually are not traditional conservatives. And their extremism, their religious extremism, is actually something that does not anymore sit within the boundaries of normality. And yet, they talk about it as if that should be the status quo for America.
They changed the definition of marriage that had been regarded by basically every human society for 5,000 years, but when 5 justices on the Supreme Court changed it, that became the law of the land.
Now, central to liberal values are respect for human dignity, individual autonomy, the free exchange of ideas and goods, and equality under law, justice tempered by mercy and compassion, social inclusion, environmental stewardship, international cooperation, and a strong commitment to democracy. Again, the new Speaker of the House was instrumental in denying Joe Biden's win in 2020 and did not vote to ratify Joe Biden's win. In liberal democracies, citizens are granted the right to actively participate in the political process, including voting. And it doesn't matter how you vote. Early voting, mail-in voting, ballot box voting, lining up at a polling place, it's irrelevant. As many people as possible should be encouraged to vote, not trying to control the vote or reducing polling places or having strict rules on who can and can't vote. Everyone should vote. This is the whole point. And that is a true democracy, but that is not something that Mike Johnson advocates for. And this is something now that the Republican Party are pushing, trying to prevent people from voting. They know that the more people that vote, the less chance they have of winning. And the reason for that is because the majority of America does not support their extremist views, are not the religious far right. Voting and expressing your opinions through speech and peaceful protest is normal. You know, nations typically provide a wide range of civil liberties, including freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. But the extent to which these liberties are upheld can vary from country to country due to factors such as constitutional protections and cultural acceptance. And the United States, unfortunately, has fallen down under the Donald Trump presidency, referring to the media as the enemy of the people and wanting to denigrate the free press. Sweden is often recognized as the world's most liberal country. It boasts a liberal democracy index of 0.878. Now, this high ranking reflects Sweden's unwavering dedication to human rights and individual freedoms, freedom of speech, religion, access to education and healthcare for all its citizens. Why wouldn't you want that? Unless you were trying to tightly control society and control, whether it be about women's access to healthcare or whether or not people can study or read certain books. It doesn't sound like freedom to me. It actually sounds like the communism that Republicans would have you think that Democrats are. Sweden has a history of progressive legislation regarding gender equality, LGBTQ rights, along with a welcoming attitude towards refugees and immigrants, like the United States used to. The United States was built by immigrants and slaves. The whole US is here because of that. And yet now, the right talk about immigrants as if they are criminals and rapists and drug dealers, and it simply isn't true. Sweden has a robust welfare system. It ensures support for its citizens regardless of their socio-economic background. Egalitarianism is a core value in Sweden, providing equal education opportunities and job prospects irrespective of race or of gender. In contrast, the United States ranks 29th in the world's list of liberal countries, with a liberal democracy index of 0.74. And while the US does offer a relatively high level of civil liberties and political rights for its citizens, it faces challenges now, such as the influence of money in politics and persistent systemic divisions, resulting in discrimination and unequal resource access for certain racial and socio-economic groups. Global trends recently suggest that the liberal international order is undergoing a transformation, and this change is exemplified by the rise of a new nationalism following events like the Brexit referendum, with the UK leaving the relationship with Europe, which I found really quite offensive, to be honest. That was part of the reason why I moved to the United States, because I was like, why is suddenly my home country so xenophobic? It was because of populism. It was because of politicians lying to the public. Sound familiar? There's also a decline in multilateralism and a surge in trade protectionism, exemplified by the US-led trade war with China. And other shifts include changes in US immigration policies, the proposed US-Mexico border wall that Donald Trump built some of it and rebuilt the rest. A shift from openness to isolationism in US policy, and decisions such as the US withdrawal of the Paris Climate Agreement and the Iran nuclear deal. Things that Donald Trump didn't even read before he dumped them, and yet they have contributed to the kind of collapse of American respect on the world stage. Now, I choose to live in the United States. I chose to relocate, to migrate, to bring my family up in the US because I felt that it would offer better opportunities and it would be a better environment for my children. And I have to get my head around the fact that we have mass shootings and school shootings here, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be any desire from Republicans who have a majority in the House to want to do anything about that. Just deny, or in the case of the new Speaker of the House, pray more. For those of us who are not religious people, those types of arguments don't carry any value. And this is my concern with the new House Speaker, is that a lot of what he's going to offer will be based on the Bible. In fact, he said only a few days ago, if you don't know what my views are, if you don't know about me and you want to know my views, pick up a Bible. He said, go to your shelf and get the Bible. He was assuming that we all have a copy of the Bible on our shelves. I do not.
What does Mike Johnson think about any issue under the sun? I said, well, go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. That's what I believe.
And all of these so-called commandments that make us better people, they can exist outside of religious communities, and secular people can love thy neighbor and not steal and not kill, as the Bible would suggest. But to all intents and purposes, Mike Johnson has a version of America that he wants to present that is not familiar to me. And I was hoping that the US would become more open and more free as time went on. And it seems that with his appointment actually we are rolling back the clock many more years than we should. And to quote him, the 18th century was a time that he thinks that the United States should operate by. And to quote Mike Johnson, he suggests that the 18th century is really the point at which we should kind of reference all of our laws. And this is really, you know, how America should be run today, based on the writings, the teachings, and the founders of the 18th century.
You bigot. Can't you be a little more open-minded? Come on. That's so like 18th century. You know, well, they told us that if we didn't maintain those 18th century values, that the republic would not stand. And so this is the condition we find ourselves in today.
That is so blind to how the rest of the world is operating. And so I just think it's important to look to Sweden and to other countries and just see how they're doing it. Because in order for the United States to maintain its position, self-titled maybe, as the greatest country in the world, you also need to look to other countries to see how they do it and why they don't have mass shootings or school shootings, why they're able to offer health care for everybody. We are choosing to not offer free health care for everyone. We are choosing not to legislate against firearms and have any kind of gun control. That is a choice, and it is a choice, it seems, that Republican legislators have no intention of changing.
At the end of the day, the problem is the human heart. It's not guns, it's not the weapons. At the end of the day, we have to protect the right of the citizens to protect themselves, and that's the Second Amendment. And that's why our party stands so strongly for that. I agree with the comments of your guests there. This is not the time to be talking about legislation. We're in the middle of that crisis right now.
I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me every day on the 5-Minute News podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with MeidasTouch.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.